can break old cycles. We can give our children a better future. I know there'll be leaders, not just in Indian country, but across America. And we've got to invest in them and believe in them and love them. And that starts from the White House all the way down here.
Storytelling helps us move from one generation to the next, carrying the stories of our past with us. Through stories, there is always the hope that the young ones will become responsible for and carry on the cultural knowledge of the elders. Guatsi, hello, my name is Amanda Chermaya, and I'm a first-year doctoral student in higher education. I'm from the Pueblo of Laguna Tribe in New Mexico, and I'm the director for the College of Education's Native Student Outreach Access and Resiliency Program, which is commonly known as Native SOAR.
Ya'ateh, hello. Hi, my name is Felicia Taghabun, and I'm a non-degree seeking student in higher education with a plan to be admitted to the higher education program in the fall of 2018. I'm Danae and Klinkit from Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm a Native American student advisor for Sunnyside Unified School District and a coordinator for Native SOAR. This is our story,
rooted in hope and told from an Indigenous perspective.
We offer a critical analysis of how race and power impact our programs and the very students we serve.
Contrary to popular belief, the history of the Americas does not begin with Christopher Columbus. Since time immemorial, Indigenous people have had sophisticated intellectual and dynamic learning systems. Institutions did not exist. Family and the community taught young people the life skills and cultural norms to survive and thrive in their environment. Transmission of knowledge occurred through the oral tradition, which is still prevalent in Indian country today. With the arrival of non-Native Americans, the systems of knowledge and inquiry changed forever. From the beginning, colonizers perceived Indigenous peoples as uneducated savages. Missionaries and colonizers sought to Christianize and civilize Indigenous peoples through education in exchange for their property. Contact with settlers birthed the concept of living in two worlds, the dominant Eurocentric infrastructure and its ideologies, and the existing Indigenous ways of life. Due to the effects of colonization, such as disease and wars, in the 17th century, it is estimated that the Indigenous population declined by 75%. In 1877, the Constitution was in full effect, which established the relationship between the federal government and American Indian and Alaskan Native communities. This unique relationship with the government distinguishes the Indigenous population from all other ethnic groups. During the 19th century, the federal government forced American Indians to reservations, resulting in their total dependence on the federal government for food, shelter, clothing, and education. In 1887, the General Allotment Act fractured Indian communities by displacing and relocating them in often undesirable locations. Rayner and Edner described this legislation as an attempt to force European values of individualism and provide initiative on Indian people who traditionally lived under a communal system. American Indians became a permanent underclass.
In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, federal off-reservation boarding schools were established throughout the United States. Spearheaded by Captain Richard Henry Pratt, Carlisle Industrial Indian School, the first off-reservation boarding school, was established in Pennsylvania. These boarding schools committed cultural genocide among American Indian children. Pratt coined the term "kill the Indian and save the man." Indian children were required to live a militarized lifestyle, forced to cut their hair, forbidden to speak their native language, and prepared for vocational work on and off the reservation. For many, this began a legacy of trauma and disenfranchisement that would be passed down the generations. In 1928, the Merriam Report provided exhaustive evidence to the Secretary of the Interior revealing the federal government's failure to provide education, health care, and social services to American Indian communities. The report served as a catalyst for American Indian education reform in the United States, which eventually led to the Indian Recognition Act of 1934. The purpose of the act was to strengthen and empower indigenous nations rather than assimilation. In the self-determination era from 1969 to 1990, educational policies enabled American Indian communities to take ownership of their education. Throughout the centuries, there have been many accounts of resistance, self-determination, and activism among American Indian communities. However, many of those stories have been oppressed and forgotten. Little is known about how the American Indians perceive their schooling. However, our positionality in the academy today enables us to share our narrative.
Christopher Columbus didn't discover America, but he did affect the political, geographical, psychological, social, and genetic makeup of people of color in the centuries to follow. Winters asserts that with the colonization of Columbus in the 15th century, the flesh, the aesthetic, the skin becomes important. She further contends that the social construct of race in the Americas is created and systems of superiority based on religion and biology are formed. Space becomes a racialized phenomenon, which provides valuable insight to critical race theory, also known as CRT. Race offers an explanation for educational inequalities for students of color in the United States. Critical race theorists such as Derek Bell, Richard Delgado, Kimberly Crenshaw, Gloria Ladson Billings, and William Tate IV argue racism is endemic in society and offers critique of society through a critical lens in relation to race, power, and white supremacy.
The CRT framework is key to interpreting the relationship and history of educational institutions and American Indians. For the scope of this project, we are focusing on 2 of the 9 tenets of tribal critical race theory, also known as tribal crit. We will describe the ways in which the University of Arizona's Native SOAR and the Sunnyside Unified School District's Native American Education Program reflect these tenets. While one of the main tenets of critical race theory states that racism is endemic to society, tribal crit maintains that colonization is endemic to society, meaning European American thought, knowledge, and power structures dominate present-day society in the United States. All aspects of American Indian life, from education to the economy, are affected by the unique impact of colonization on the constructs of race and class. Tribal crit evolved out of the need to address the American Indian experience of colonization. The 6th component of tribal crit is a recognition that governmental policies and educational policies towards indigenous peoples have historically been oriented toward a problematic goal of assimilation. An appropriate education was assumed to be that which eradicated Indianness or promoted Anglo values and ways of communicating. Today, tribal crit would argue education for American Indians is not always rooted in the goal of assimilation. Although some assimilation seems to be an inevitable outcome of education that occurs through the formal structures of Western schooling.
The University of Arizona resides on traditional Tohono O'odham ancestral tribal lands. There are approximately 75 tribes represented within the student body. Native SOAR is a multi-generational service learning mentoring program that provides multiple layers of support with middle school and high school students as the main focus. Since 2013, the program has worked with over 3,700 students, dedicated over 4,000 hours worth of mentoring, and outreach to over 40 schools. Current mentoring sites include Challenger Middle School, Tucson Magnet High School, and Hoshan Leadership and Preparatory School. Over 75% of the undergraduate students who enroll in Native SOAR identify as Native American. Historically, the purpose of education for American Indians was to take them from savagery to civilization, bearing Eurocentric ideologies, philosophies, and work ethic. Predominantly white institutions like the University of Arizona still perpetuates that mentality today. Native SOAR counters forms of systematic oppression and curriculum rooted in racist and Eurocentric ideologies and practices by integrating American Indian pedagogies, philosophies, and systems of knowing within its program structure. Native SOAR replicates a sense of home and creates a familial environment in and outside of the classroom, which increases undergraduates' sense of belonging. Comparative to all student populations, American Indian students have the lowest enrollment, persistence, and graduation rates in post-secondary institutions. Despite Native SOAR's high impact on student retention and graduation rates, Native SOAR is not institutionalized, even though the program was created over 12 years ago. While we've been grateful for the pockets of financial support from the University of Arizona, community partners, and the Helios Foundation, our program continues to survive primarily off of grant funding. Why doesn't a state-funded institution finance an effective program that serves one of the state's most vulnerable student populations? Unfortunately, this has been the case since the establishment of education. American Indians are overlooked and our narratives are lost in a sea of majoritarian narratives because of the small population and limited space American Indian students occupy in higher education. American Indians are a subordinate population in education, and there will always be a fight to justify funding and services. As I learned to play this higher educational fundraising game, which is rooted in white supremacy, academic capitalism, and material gain, I am navigating new territory, but with the knowledge that I'm operating with a system that historically was not designed for me or other American Indian students.
As David Stovall relates in his initial encounter with CRT, this semester has been a watershed moment for me as well. Studying CRT and eventually tribal crit caused me to interrogate the ways in which I was previously educated or miseducated, and most recently the ways in which I served and viewed the students in the American Indian community. Without realizing it, I found I was sustaining oppressive systems in my own interactions with my students, especially when I was instructed to monitor their academic progress and attendance and base my interventions primarily off of their performance. Given that the goals of NAAP are to increase academic performance and attendance rates, the program is already rooted in objectives that reinforce hegemonic standards for student success. Unfortunately, much of my experience in NAAP supports Brayboy's position that in CRT, education posits that racism is endemic to society and in education, and that racism has become so deeply ingrained in society's and schooling's consciousness that it is often invisible. Brayboy also observes that the colonization has been so complete that many American Indians fail to recognize that we are taking up colonialist ideas when we fail to express ourselves in ways that may challenge dominant society's ideas about who and what we are supposed to be, how we are supposed to behave, and what we are supposed to be within the larger population. As an American Indian educator, this is particularly damning, but serves as a reminder that we must, as Stovall states, engage our contradictions while understanding that the larger justice project in education remains rife with imperfections and contestations that will perpetually challenge how we act and move. Once I began to recognize how my own views were colonized, I began the analytical process of change.
It's important to share a story because a lot of people say that we live in teepees, that we're supposed to be in the desert, that we can't have an education because we're dropouts. And that's not who we are.
How does it make you feel when you hear those things?
It makes me feel like I want to change my whole life. And it makes me feel that I'm not, like, I can't be a part of a real world if I'm a Native American.
In our interview, Jasmine at the age of 13 recognizes how society views American Indians as an inferior race and class. From a tribal crit perspective, it can be disheartening as educators to know that American Indians operate within an educational system that does not typically value tribal identities, customs, and beliefs. However, there's personal fulfillment in knowing that we are agents of change in America's educational system as we are creating spaces designed to engage American Indian learners.
After a year of serving American Indian students together in both Native SOAR and in NAAP, it is satisfying to know that we are further equipped to address the effects of our own colonization and to disrupt the educational practices of institutes that offer little to no support in terms of policies and funding. Moving forward, as we revise the syllabus for the fall 2018 semester of Native SOAR, and as I revamp my role at Challenger Middle School, we are making the conscious effort to take elements of CRT and tribal crit into our work on the ground. In Native SOAR, we plan to strengthen the home away from home concept, where our students are welcomed by American Indian educators, encouraged to read the indigenized work of American Indian scholars, trained to engage with American Indian mentees, while they themselves are mentored by current American Indian graduate students and professionals. This space within our classroom will be carved out and situated within the walls of the institution that was once designed to assimilate, acculturate, and obliterate American Indian identity. In Resistance, our space is purposefully intended to receive our students as holders and creators of knowledge, where their histories, cultures, and languages are cherished and celebrated, that even they would be empowered and inspired to empower others. Additionally, home will be enlarged to incorporate a stronger connection with existing American Indian campus partners, which will require further efforts to network and in some cases seek out and identify other Indigenous colleagues who are sprinkled throughout the university setting. Our campus partners, our campus family, will bring their voices and giftings into our classroom, offering an even greater vision of hope to our native SOAR undergraduates. Together, within this community of home and family, we believe we will offer a different reality from that which is offered under the realities of white supremacy. With the inception of the College of Education's Indigenous Thinkers meetings, it seems that our timing couldn't be better. As my contract as a Native American student advisor with NAAP ends and the fall semester approaches, I will take on a revised role of my own creation, constructed to empower the American Indian student population and expanded to support the entire student population at Challenger Middle School. In its embryonic stages, I am certain of one thing. It will view the community and family knowledge of communities of color as a strength, and it will be a space in which systemic forces of race and racism are confronted and hopefully dismantled.
We understand that our work at the University of Arizona
And in Sunnyside Unified School District as individuals has minimal impact, but together, within the collective of community and family,
the potential for change and victory
for one student at a time is immeasurable.
Kampung papat nong wang kukukan.